When we talk about the Super Falcons of Nigeria, Africa's most successful women's football team, we often think of modern stars like Asisat Oshola, Rasheedat Ajibade, and Chiamaka Nnadozie. But before these names dominated headlines, before Nigeria became a constant figure on the world stage, there were women who fought through obstacles, with little media coverage, poor facilities, and almost no recognition, to put Nigerian women's football on the map. In today's story, we go back in time to celebrate the first 3 Super Falcons players to play abroad, women who didn't just carry the Nigerian dream on their shoulders but also opened international doors for future generations. These pioneers are Nkiru Okosim, Florence Omogbemi, and Patience Sava, 3 names that stand as the backbone of women's football progress in Nigeria. Let's dive in, starting with number 3. Patience Sava, the swift striker who conquered Sweden. Before the likes of Desire Operanozie or Asisat Oshola were scoring goals in Europe, there was Patience Sava, a name that stood out in the early days of the Super Falcons. Born in Nigeria in the early 1970s, Patience grew up playing football on the streets with boys. At a time when football was seen as a man's game, she pushed boundaries with sheer determination. Her big break came when she was called up to the national team in the early 1990s, right when the Super Falcons were beginning to gain international recognition. Patience Sava represented Nigeria in the 1995 FIFA Women's World Cup in Sweden, the 1999 World Cup in the USA, and the 2003 World Cup, as well as the 2000 Sydney Olympics. She was one of the most consistent forwards of her generation, known for her speed, intelligent movement, and ability to hold up play in attack. But what made Ava truly special was her international breakthrough. At a time when very few African women were signed abroad, Patience Sava joined Umeå IK, a professional women's football club in Sweden. Umeå IK was among Europe's top women's clubs, later home to global legends like Marta from Brazil, and Ava's presence there in the 1990s marked a historic moment. Playing in Sweden gave her exposure to modern football systems, tactical training, and professional competition, things that were still developing in Nigeria. Her move abroad also helped to raise awareness of African talent in European women's leagues, especially during a period when very few clubs were willing to sign African players. At Umeå IK, Ava adapted quickly to European football. Her agility and work rate made her a valuable player in attack, and her performances caught the eye of football followers back home in Nigeria. She became a symbol of what was possible, that Nigerian women could compete in the best leagues in Europe. Patience Sava didn't just make history by playing abroad, she was part of the golden generation that made Nigeria a dominant force in Africa. She won several African Women's Championship titles, representing the Super Falcons with distinction for over a decade. Off the pitch, Ava has remained an outspoken figure about the need to improve women's football development in Nigeria. Her story continues to inspire many young female footballers who dream of taking their talents beyond African shores. Patience Sava's legacy is simple but powerful. She proved that Nigerian women could shine on the biggest stages, even when the world wasn't watching closely. Florence Omogbemi, the captain who led and conquered abroad. The story of Florence Omogbemi is one that combines leadership, courage, and pure football excellence. Born in Delta State in 1974, Florence grew up in a generation where female footballers were hardly recognized. But from an early age, she displayed an uncommon hunger for the game. By her teenage years, she had already become a key figure in the Nigerian women's football scene. Omogbemi was a midfielder with great vision, known for her composure, passing ability, and tactical intelligence, qualities that made her indispensable to the national team. Omogbemi's international journey began in the 1990s when she was part of Nigeria's squad to the 1991 FIFA Women's World Cup in China, the very first Women's World Cup in history. From then on, she became a permanent fixture in the Falcons lineup, helping Nigeria dominate Africa for more than a decade. As Nigeria's captain, she led the team to win 4 African Women's Championship titles in 1998, 2000, 2002, and 2004. But her story goes beyond her achievements on African soil. Florence Omogbemi was one of the first Nigerian players to sign for clubs abroad and one of the first to do so in the United States. She played in the US Women's Leagues, featuring 4 clubs like the Boston Breakers and San Diego Spirit, both of which were part of the early era of professional women's football in America. These were not just random teams, they were among the founding club. These were not just random teams, they were among the founding clubs of the Women's United Soccer Association, WUSA, which later evolved into what we now know as the National Women's Soccer League, NWSL. For Omogbemi, playing abroad was not just about football, it was about growth, exposure, and leadership. Competing in the US gave her access to professional facilities, structured coaching, and a competitive environment that sharpened her skills even more. It also helped her bring back valuable experience to the Super Falcons. Under her captaincy, Nigeria achieved one of its greatest moments, reaching the quarter-finals of the 1999 FIFA Women's World Cup, a historic run that remains Nigeria's best ever finish in the competition to this day. After retiring, Omogbemi didn't walk away from the game. Instead, she turned to coaching, and in 2016, she made history again by becoming the first woman to win the Africa Women Cup of Nations as both a player and a coach, when she led the Super Falcons to glory in Cameroon. Florence Omogbemi's career abroad was a bridge between two worlds, showing that Nigerian footballers could transition from local champions to global professionals. Her story stands as a reminder that leadership is not just about wearing the captain's armband, it's about opening paths for others to follow. One Nkiru Okosim, the First Lady of Nigerian women's football abroad. If Nigerian women's football had a true pioneer, a face that first represented the courage to step into foreign lands and play the beautiful game, that face would be Nkiru Okosim. Born in 1973 in Delta State, Nkiru was destined for football greatness. She was among the earliest group of players called up when the Nigerian women's national team, the Super Falcons, was officially formed in 1991. But even before that, she had been playing competitively for local sides and representing her state in regional tournaments. When Nigeria played its first ever FIFA Women's World Cup in 1991 in China, Okosim was one of the youngest players in the squad and one of the most talented. She was a creative midfielder with flair, vision, and confidence on the ball. Her technical skills and football intelligence stood out so much that international scouts began to notice her. Her big break came when she moved to the United States, becoming one of the very first Nigerian female footballers to sign for a professional club abroad. Nkiru Okosim joined the Charlotte Lady Eagles, a club that played in the USLW League, one of the top divisions for women's football in America at that time. At Charlotte Lady Eagles, Okosim became known for her ball control, long passes, and leadership in midfield. Her ability to dictate play and her understanding of the game earned her respect from teammates and opponents alike. Her success in the US opened doors for future generations of Nigerian women. It proved that African players could thrive abroad, not just survive. She was not only a footballer but also an ambassador of Nigerian women's football during a period when the sport had almost no funding, sponsorship, or global media presence. Okosim went on to play in 4 FIFA Women's World Cups in 1991, 1995, 1999, and 2003, as well as the 2000 Sydney Olympics, one of the longest international careers in Super Falcons history. She captained Nigeria 4 years and helped the team dominate Africa, winning multiple continental titles along the way. Even after retiring, her influence continued to grow. Nkiru Okosim has been involved in football development and mentoring younger players, constantly advocating for better structures for women's football in Nigeria. Her story is one of perseverance, vision, and inspiration. She broke the glass ceiling when there was no roadmap. She played abroad when very few women dared to dream beyond the Nigerian borders. And most importantly, she became a living proof that Nigerian women belong among the best in the world. Before the world knew of stars like Asisa Tashola at Barcelona, Omogbemi in Spain, or Chiamaka Nnadozie in France, there were 3 women who first carried the torch beyond Nigerian soil: Nkiru Okosim, Florence Omogbemi, and Patience Sava. These women didn't have social media recognition, big contracts, or modern football boots. They played for the love of the game, for pride, and for a country that was still learning to value women's sports. Their journeys abroad from Charlotte Lady Eagles in the US to Boston Breakers to Umeå IK in Sweden were not just transfers, they were historical statements of courage. Because of them, scouts began to look at Nigeria differently. Because of them, the Super Falcons became a respected name in women's football. And because of them, generations of young girls could believe that their dreams were valid, that they, too, could play in Europe, America, or anywhere in the world. So, when you see modern players lifting soul-lifting trophies, signing for top clubs, or getting global endorsements, remember the pioneers. Remember Okosim, Omagbimi, and Ava, the women who walked so others could run. They are the first Super Falcons to play abroad, the trailblazers of Nigerian women's football, and the unsung heroes of our sporting history.